You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. You sit there knowing the truth, don't you? The weight in your chest isn't mystery, it's recognition. You've surrendered your sovereignty. You've handed over the command of your inner kingdom to forces that neither know nor care about your peace. You've made yourself subject to whims, moods, and decisions that were never yours to control. This is where weakness begins, not in caring, but in needing that care returned on your terms. When did you first abdicate your throne? Was it watching your father's approval flicker like candlelight in wind, never knowing what would earn his nod of recognition? Was it discovering that your complete devotion guaranteed nothing in return? Or was it the slow erosion, death by 1,000 compromises until you forgot you were born to rule your own domain? This is ground zero, not strength, but the brutal acknowledgement of your own surrender. The weakness isn't in feeling. Dead men don't feel, and they certainly don't lead. The weakness is in the desperate hunger for reciprocal validation, the pathetic scorekeeping that reduces love to transaction. You've confused attachment with strength, need with connection, control with power. You've made yourself small, waiting for permission to exist fully. You check your phone like a beggar checking for coins. You analyze messages like a forensic investigator searching for proof of your worth. You've become a detective in your own diminishment, gathering evidence from others to determine if you matter. This is not how kings behave. You seek completion in another when you were born complete. You've built your identity around being someone's solution, someone's missing piece, someone's answer to loneliness. But what happens when they solve their own problems? What happens when they find their own path to wholeness? You're left holding a role that never belonged to you, playing a character in someone else's story while your own narrative withers and dies. Observe how you move through the world when attached. Your mood rises and falls with text message timestamps. Your energy shifts with their attention or absence. Your entire day can be colored by whether they seem pleased to see you, whether they laugh at your words, whether they choose your company or someone else's. This is not the behavior of a sovereign man. This is the behavior of a subject waiting for royal acknowledgement from those who never claimed dominion over you. Perhaps that's exactly what this is, the child in you, still seeking what was never given, still believing that if you sacrifice enough of yourself, you'll finally receive what every man deserves by birthright. The child who learned that love was conditional, that acceptance required performance, that vulnerability was weakness to be hidden or apologized for. You remember being whole before you learned to fracture yourself for others' comfort. Before you develop the sophisticated systems of self-betrayal that now govern your relationships. Before you learn to calculate the risks of being real. That wholeness isn't lost, it's been buried under years of accommodation and compromise. But recognition isn't judgment, it's intelligence. Weakness isn't character flaw, it's starting position. Every man who ever commanded respect first had to confront where he commanded none, where he gave his power away, where he allowed others to determine his worth, his mood, his direction. Marcus Aurelius, commanding legions while commanding himself, wrote constantly about his own tendencies toward weakness, his own struggles with attachment and desire. Here was a man with ultimate external power who understood that the only battle that mattered was fought within his own mind. He wrote to himself about the temptation to seek validation, the human tendency to make happiness dependent on external circumstances. He knew that strength isn't the absence of weakness, it's the daily choice to act in spite of it. Then comes the storm. Life strips away illusions with surgical precision. The person you thought was permanent leaves. The future you planned crumbles. The identity you built around being someone's anchor dissolves. You wake up and realize you've been living someone else's life, filtered through their preferences, shaped by their needs, defined by their vision of who you should be. You become a satellite orbiting someone else's sun, forgetting you were born to burn with your own fire. And now you stand in the wreckage, stripped of all external definitions, forced to answer the hardest question: who are you when you're no one's anything? When you're not the devoted partner, the reliable friend, the problem solver, the emotional support system. This chaos isn't punishment, it's education. Life's way of asking the questions you've been avoiding. It's the universe forcing you to confront what you've built your life upon. Has it been solid rock or shifting sand? Have you been developing genuine strength or elaborate coping mechanisms that crumble under pressure? Heraclitus knew you never step in the same river twice. The river changes. You change. The chaos forces you to discover what remains when everything external is stripped away. It asks the hard question: what survives when your carefully constructed identity is scattered to the winds? Most men run. They can't bear the silence, the uncertainty, the absence of external validation. They immediately rebuild the same structures that just collapsed, like rebuilding a house with the same faulty foundation that caused the fire. They seek another person to complete them, another role to define them, another source of validation to tell them they exist. They jump from one dependency to another, from relationship to relationship, addiction to addiction, distraction to distraction, anything to avoid facing the fundamental questions that chaos forces upon them. They mistake movement for progress, busyness for purpose, noise for meaning. They fear stillness because stillness reveals the emptiness they've been desperately trying to fill with others' attention and approval. But you, if you're ready to reclaim your throne, you sit with the chaos. You let it teach you. You discover that you can survive without everything you thought you needed. You learn that your worth exists independent of others' recognition. You find that your identity isn't determined by the roles you play in other people's stories. You discover there's something in you that remains constant regardless of external storms. Call it your essential self, your core, your unshakable foundation. It existed before you learned to seek validation, and it will exist long after you stop needing approval to feel whole. This is where terror lives, in the space between who you were and who you might become. Here, you're accountable only to yourself. Your excuses evaporate because there's no one else to blame for your choices. Your victim stories lose power because you realize you're not a victim, you're a volunteer who's been unconsciously agreeing to arrangements that diminish your sovereignty. The comfortable narratives crumble. You're left with raw truth. You're responsible for your experience. Not for what happens to you, much is beyond control, but for how you respond, how you interpret, how you choose to grow or stagnate. This realization terrifies because it means if you created your current reality, you can create a different one. No more excuses. No more blaming circumstances or others' choices. Guilt comes in waves. Time wasted chasing approval instead of building character. Energy spent on wrong people, wrong priorities. Opportunities missed while busy being consumed by attachment and need. Dreams abandoned because they required disappointing someone, going against their preferences, risking their disapproval. Times you said yes when you meant no, smiled when you wanted to scream, made yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable. You see how much of your life has been spent avoiding conflict, maintaining peace, keeping others happy at the expense of your own growth and authenticity. You became an expert mood reader, a professional anticipator, adjusting your personality to match others' preferences. You developed chameleon-like abilities, becoming whoever others needed you to be. Forgetting who you were beneath the performance. You gave away your power voluntarily. No one forced you to make their happiness your responsibility. Beneath guilt lies shame, deeper, more primal, more destructive. Shame tells you that needing connection reveals fundamental flaw, that real men don't have these problems. Shame whispers that vulnerability equals weakness, that needing others equals failure. Shame creates impossible standards, ensuring perpetual inadequacy, always feeling like you're failing at being a man. Face the shame not with aggression but with clinical detachment. The shame is old, born when you learned that natural needs for love and acceptance were somehow wrong. When you first heard that boys don't cry, men don't need, vulnerability equals weakness. These messages were reinforced every time you were told to man up, stop being sensitive, handle things alone. These messages created generations of men disconnected from their hearts, afraid of their feelings, unable to form deep connections because they were taught connection was weakness. But these messages were lies, born from a culture that confused strength with emotional numbness, independence with isolation. Seneca understood, examine thoughts without judgment. Wisdom begins with honest self-assessment, not self-flagellation. He practiced what Stoics called the view from above, seeing your struggles with the same objectivity you'd have for a friend going through similar difficulties. Your shame isn't character judgment, it's information about where you learned self-betrayal. It's data about messages you internalized, beliefs you adopted, coping mechanisms you developed to survive in a world that seemed to punish authenticity. Use it as data, not evidence of unworthiness. Now comes the choice that separates boys from men, comfort or discipline. Comfort whispers, find another person to fill the void, another distraction to avoid the work of becoming whole. Comfort promises you shouldn't have to do this work, someone else should provide what you need. Discipline commands, do the hard thing that builds character when no one's watching. Discipline tells you the work is yours, no one else can do it. Waiting for external circumstances to change is wasted time that could be spent changing yourself. Discipline isn't punishment, it's training. Training to find your center regardless of external storms. Training to build such solid foundation that you can love without losing yourself, connect without dependency, care without making your well-being contingent on uncontrollable outcomes. Discipline appears in small choices first. Wake early and sit with thoughts instead of immediately seeking external validation through your phone. Exercise not to impress others but to keep promises to yourself. Experience strength from pushing through resistance. Read books that challenge rather than confirm existing beliefs, seeking ideas that disturb comfortable assumptions. Spend time alone and discover your company isn't burden but privilege. Learn to sit with silence without filling it with distraction. Practice being present with whatever emotions arise without trying to fix, change, or escape them through external means. Each disciplined choice votes for the man you're becoming. Each harder choice builds self-reliance muscle, not the bitter self-reliance of men who've given up on connection, but mature self-reliance of men who choose connection from wholeness rather than neediness. You notice mood stability, independence from external events, less subjection to others' emotional weather patterns. You appreciate beauty without needing to possess it, enjoy company without fearing its absence, feel love without demanding ownership or guarantee of return. Discipline becomes practice. Practice becomes identity. You realize you've confused strength with hardness, independence with isolation, power with domination. True strength is soft, needs no proof, no demonstration of superiority, no winning arguments or controlling outcomes. True independence chooses interdependence from wholeness rather than need. It's being able to stand alone so completely that when you choose to stand with others, it's gift freely given rather than desperate attempt to avoid loneliness. True power remains centered regardless of others' responses. Its capacity to love without guarantee, give without keeping score, remain open-hearted when others are closed, maintain principles when inconvenient or unpopular. Real power isn't controlling others or avoiding discomfort or getting what you want when you want it. Real power is inner gravity, remaining anchored in your truth when everything shifts around you. It's the capacity to be a point of stability in an unstable world, not because you're rigid, but because you're rooted in something deeper than circumstances. A man with inner gravity doesn't chase, doesn't run after people walking away, doesn't try convincing others of his worth, doesn't exhaust himself making reluctant people want his company. He understands desperation repels while confidence attracts, neediness drives away while self-sufficiency draws closer. He doesn't beg, plead, or manipulate for attention. Doesn't make worth dependent on external validation or happiness contingent on others' choices. He creates such strong center that others are naturally drawn to his stability, presence, unshakable sense of self. This power is quiet, doesn't announce itself or demand recognition, simply is. Like mountains standing regardless of weather, unchanged by storms, unmoved by small dramas playing out on their slopes. Like deep wells providing water without fanfare, consistently, reliably, without need for praise. Like lighthouses shining not to be seen but to guide others home, offering light as service rather than performance. This power serves truth, growth, collective well-being, not ego. Its power in service of love rather than control. Seeks not to dominate but elevate, not diminish others but inspire them to find their own strength, their own center, their own path to wholeness. Epictetus, born slave who found freedom within bondage, taught, "We suffer not from events but from judgments about events." Men with inner gravity examine judgments, question assumptions, hold opinions lightly while gripping principles firmly. They respond rather than react. When challenged, they consider rather than immediately defend. When criticized, they listen for truth rather than dismiss from wounded pride. They choose battles wisely, fighting with wisdom rather than anger, strategy rather than emotion, long-term vision rather than short-term impulse. With power comes recognition. You'll often walk alone. Not from antisocial tendencies or bitterness, but because inner development is inherently solitary work. Others may walk parallel paths, offer support and companionship, share similar struggles and insights, but the actual work of becoming who you're meant to be, only you can do that in quiet moments when you face yourself without masks or excuses. Aloneness isn't loneliness. Loneliness is pain of disconnection from others, ache of wanting contact and not having it, sense of being isolated and forgotten. Aloneness is peace of connection with yourself, satisfaction in your own company, richness of inner life, sufficiency of personal resources. Learning to be alone without loneliness, one of life's greatest freedoms. No longer at mercy of others' availability, attention, approval. Can enjoy solitude without depression, silence without anxiety, own thoughts without judgment. Become your own best friend, wise counselor, source of comfort and strength. Distinguish solitude from isolation. Isolation withdraws from life through fear, hurt, resentment. It's bitter retreat of wounded men who've decided that if they can't control others' responses, they'll remove themselves from all possibility of connection. Isolation is protection through disconnection, safety through numbness. Solitude engages life from choice and strength. Conscious decision to spend time alone not from fear of others, but because you value your own company, have inner work to do, need space to think and reflect and grow. In solitude, you're not hiding, you're preparing to meet the world more fully. Not avoiding connection, ensuring you connect from wholeness, not neediness. The man who can be alone can truly be with others. Brings presence instead of absence, fullness instead of emptiness, gifts instead of needs. Loves not to be loved, but because love is his nature, because giving love feels good, because expressing care and appreciation is how he naturally moves through the world. He connects not to avoid loneliness, but to share abundance, offer what he's discovered, learn from others' experiences. engages not to take but to give, not fill his emptiness but express his fullness. His relationships become acts of generosity rather than attempts at acquisition. This path requires comfort with being misunderstood. Others trapped in attachment patterns may not understand your independence. They'll interpret self-sufficiency as coldness, boundaries as rejection, peace as indifference. They may mistake lack of neediness for lack of caring, emotional stability for unavailability. Some will try pulling you back into codependency patterns, not from malice but from discomfort with your growth. Your development threatens their sense of what's normal, possible, necessary. They may prefer the version of you that needed them, sought their approval, made them feel important through your dependence. Your job isn't convincing them otherwise, but remaining anchored in truth. You can't control how others interpret your journey, choices, growth. Can only control whether you remain faithful to your development, continue moving toward wholeness regardless of others' opinions or reactions. Walking alone doesn't mean walking bitter. Bitter men remain attached to anger, resentment, victim stories. They carry wounds like badges of honor, disappointments like weapons, past hurts like shields against future connection. Bitterness is attachment wearing different masks, still allowing external events to determine internal state. Men who truly walk alone release even attachment to being wronged. They forgive not because others deserved it, but because forgiveness freed them from carrying old wounds, from allowing past events to poison present moments. They choose peace over being right, freedom over revenge, growth over stagnation. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, man who creates own values rather than inheriting others. Not about superiority over others, but superiority over former self. Outgrowing limitations once accepted as permanent, expanding beyond boundaries once believed fixed. Outgrowing need for external approval, developing internal compass, own sense of right and wrong, valuable and worthless, worth pursuing and abandoning. Becoming author of own story rather than character in someone else's narrative, director of own life rather than actor playing roles others wrote. Walking this path of independence and strength, you understand ultimate power is responsibility. Not burden others place on you, not weight of controlling outcomes beyond influence, but conscious choice to own responses, choices, life. Responsibility isn't what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. Recognition that while you can't control events, you control response to events. Can't control others' choices, but can control your own. Can't control outcomes, but can control effort, attitude, commitment to growth. This responsibility extends beyond self. Men with real inner strength naturally become strength sources for others through example, not preaching. Others see stability and remember their own potential for peace. Witness independence and recall their own capacity for self-reliance. Observe quiet confidence and recognize what's possible when men stop seeking completion outside themselves. The responsibility, use strength serving something larger than personal comfort, convenience, immediate desires. Speak truth when uncomfortable. Maintain standards when others lower theirs. Choose harder right over easier wrong. Become the man others can count on, not from neediness, but because reliability defines character. This includes willingness to let others face struggles without rushing to rescue, solve problems, shield from consequences. Sometimes most loving action is allowing others to experience natural results of decisions, learn lessons, develop strength through facing challenges. Men who try saving everyone from struggles rob them of growth that comes through difficulty, working through problems, developing resilience through adversity. Well-meaning interference becomes disservice, preventing others from discovering capabilities, resources, capacity for strength and wisdom. True masculine responsibility knows when to act and when to allow, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to engage and when to withdraw. Wisdom in action. Strength tempered by compassion. Power guided by principle. Holding space for others' growth without making their growth your responsibility, offering support without creating dependency, loving without controlling. In the end, journey from attachment to inner strength isn't about becoming hard, closed, disconnected from full range of human experience. Not about building walls so high nothing can touch you. It's about becoming so secure in your worth that you can open your heart without fear, love without guarantee, engage fully while holding outcomes lightly. True strength allows vulnerability. Real power includes gentleness. Genuine independence enables deeper connection. The man who finds his center can afford softness because it comes from strength, not weakness. Can afford openness because it comes from choice, not desperation. Can afford caring because it comes from abundance, not neediness. The qualities you thought you had to abandon to become strong, tenderness, connection, deep caring, are enhanced by inner development. But now they flow from fullness rather than emptiness, choice rather than compulsion, love rather than need. This is the path of inner gravity, journey from being pulled by external forces to being guided by internal truth. Not easy, but the only path to genuine freedom, authentic strength, peace that can't be disturbed by external circumstances. The only way to become the man you were meant to be before the world taught you to be someone else. Walk it with patience, courage, quiet confidence of finally heading home to yourself. Every step from dependency toward true power. Every moment of chosen solitude a moment of reclaimed sovereignty. Every disciplined act an investment in who you're becoming. This is your path, your journey, your responsibility and freedom. Walk it like the king you were born to be.